Thank you, Mike Corrado. Thank you, Nikon. Thank you to all of you who are investing your time and your energy to be here to learn today. I've been here learning all day. And so I was in that seat right there, listening to Joe McNally this morning. There's just so much information. And I'm constantly impressed by the fact that people are coming to learn. They're investing. You could have been working today. You could have been going to school. You could have been hanging out with your friends. You might have passed up a shoot to come here to improve your game. A lifetime of pro sports has taught me that preparation really does create the separation. So the fact that you are here investing your time in yourselves, we are all going to be better when we leave this convention center. I'm a sports photographer, born and raised in Seattle, Washington. So I'm a Seahawks. I grew up a fan of the Seahawks and the Mariners and the Sonics. Not a lot of success in those sports franchises. I don't know where all of you are from. And so my job is team photographer for the Seattle Seahawks. And it's my job to capture moments, to tell stories. Our coach told me, he said, your one job is to take our fans along with us wherever we go. They can't come with us on the bus. They can't come with us to the hotel, in the meetings, in the locker room. Take our fans on that journey. And as a person trained as a photojournalist, what a dream job. What a wonderful opportunity. It's a lot of responsibility, but really it's a joy, because my responsibility, my job is to tell stories. When I was littler than I am now, I'm clearly not, I wanted to be the first Asian American basketball player in the NBA. And I know I'm probably 7 feet, maybe 1 on this stage. You guys are already laughing at me. I didn't have the height, didn't have the jumper, was terrible with my offhand, so basketball was out of it. I went to the Seattle Times, found great mentorship. And I want you guys to remember that. Be a mentor to someone else and be a mentee to someone who's going to lift you up, to challenge you, to improve you. When I worked at the Seattle Times, not only did I use all of the hair product in the Pacific Northwest in this picture, but I trained to be a photojournalist. I trained to tell stories. And I covered spot news. I covered riots and fires and shootings. This is from the WTO riots. And I was the youngest person on that staff by a number of years. And they said, you know, go cover the riots. You're going to be on the overnight shift. So I get this picture. I'm super proud of this picture, right? It's like a 3-hour standoff, and the police throw the tear gas can, and the protester comes out and he kicks it back. And I'm like, ambient light, a little bit of flash, right? I love this photo, and I bring it back, and I'm, feeling pretty good about myself right now. Like, I'm going to get this baby on A1. My editor goes, I send you to a news event, and you come back with a soccer photo. Can't rely on you for anything. So sports, sports was my thing. So, I'm always looking, as that last slide said, something a little bit different, something that can tell a story in a different way. And faces tell stories. Joe McNally spoke this morning about light, right? And Jerry and Dixie are going to talk about facial expression. And Chloe talked about directing, right? In sports, I don't get to direct. I just have to capture. But I'm always looking for the human element. So I worked on my craft, and like a lot of people, action, 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 right? Young sports photographers. I want the biggest lens I can get and the fastest camera I can get, and I just want to go make really dope, hard-hitting, peak action photos. And when we think about sports photography, the first thing we think about is action, right? High shutter speeds, capturing the peak moment. And so we want high shutter speeds. We want to be above 1,000th of a second, 2,000th of a second. because when that collision happens, we want to freeze the mask, the batter's helmet, the sunglasses. We want to capture that moment of impact. On the bicycle kick, we want to be able to see the elevation. This is shot from a low angle, right? You see sports photographers, if you watch the football games yesterday, the really good ones are kneeling. Low angle, looking up. Not only do we see then beneath people's baseball hats and football helmets, but then we add to that illusion of height and depth. I was telling my friend Paul Van Allen over here, the Z9 and the 400mm 2.8 Z lens with the built-in teleconverter, my bread and butter. Like for action, I rely on that. I want a long lens because it will also clean up the background, and 20 frames a second raw, 30 frames per second, I can freeze moments like this. I rely on cameras to be able to work in minus 10 degrees. And I rely on finding, while I'm capturing peak moments, like Doug Baldwin midair, finding details like this. So when we talk about sports photography and I talk about action, you can all remember memorable action photos, right? Rest in peace, Sports Illustrated. There are a few of you, and I'm not going to point to age people, there are some of us who remember the heyday of Sports Illustrated. That's what I grew up with. Man, I just wanted a photo in Sports Illustrated, much less get an assignment or get a cover. You know, Joe McNally was up here a couple hours ago with all of his great work for the great magazines. And when we think about action, what are the action photos we remember, right? It might be Jordan's jumper against Utah, right? It might be something along those lines. But what we really remember are the reaction photos, aren't they? Think about that. Think of all the photos in your memory banks. For those of you who are old enough, it's Bjorn Borg on his knees at Wimbledon, right? It's Kobe cradling the trophy. It's Brandi Chastain at the World Cup on her knees with her hands up. No one remembers what the photo looked like when she struck the penalty kick. Why do we then identify with that reaction moment? Because reaction shows us the human part of the sports experience. I shoot football for a living. They look like Imperial stormtroopers, right? Don't they? Pads and helmets and now sleeves and gloves and shields. Like 10 years ago, we could see their eyes. Right now they have a shield. So how do we tell that story? I feel so strongly about capturing the humanity of sports. So Usain Bolt wins multiple golds at the Olympics. The reaction, not only in his face, but the faces of his competitors. I don't know how old Usain Bolt was at this point, 22 years old, trained his whole life for 10 seconds. But so did the other two guys who finished silver and bronze. You trained your whole life for those 10 seconds. We tend, when we're shooting, with digital, and I love digital. I love the magic of digital. Right, my wife, I smell so much better when I come home, not having been in a dark room for 7 hours, and smelling like fumes and chemicals, and digital gives us that instant feedback. But what happens when we are shooting action and we get the catch or the tackle or the dunk or the home run? What's the first thing we do? We look at the back, right? What the photojournalistic term, and this is very technical if you want to write it down, is called chimping. chimping. My friend, you don't have to write it down. My friend Robert Deutsch was photographing the US Open when digital cameras first came out. And if you've ever watched people photograph a tennis tournament from mid-court, they do this. Medvedev, Djokovic, Medvedev, Djokovic, back, forth, back, forth. Someone hits a winner, and what did all 20 photographers in the row do? They look like chimps. So everybody's going back, forth. It's like a little dance. Okay? I'm telling you, I've talked to every tech and every engineer for Nikon. Looking at the back screen of your photo will not improve it. It's not going to get better after the fact. I can zoom in and like, I missed the focus. Maybe I didn't. It doesn't change. So we want to keep shooting so we can find that reaction moment. And they're everywhere. We just have to shoot through the play. Do you understand what I'm saying? Shoot through the play. Shoot when the race is finished. Shoot when the play is finished. Keep shooting. Raise your hands if you shot film. 36 frames. What happened when we got to 30? We were nervous, right? Like, oh my God, I've only got 6 frames left. Now we shoot digital, right? When there's 80 frames left, now we're nervous. That's 3 rolls of film we still have to go. And we're like, I gotta change my card, man. I don't wanna miss the next shot. Because we're gonna shoot through the plays. Another really important part of showing the human side of sports is setting the scene. And we always wanna set the scene, because we wanna show readers what's going on, not just the overhand smash winner. Okay, if you have watched the Australian Open, okay, wonderful light at the Australian Open. And those scene setters and the overheads and the US Open, and Jen Potheiser was on stage earlier, and she and I will be sharing a panel together with Mike Corrado. Her wonderful work capturing light, setting scenes. All of these are ways to tell stories in sports. This is from the Olympics opening ceremonies. This is natural light. Joe would have lit this, right? For those of you who are here with Joe, you know, like, it's 17 strobes, and then I lit the fire and hardwired it. Always looking for something different. Sometimes setting the scene literally is setting the scene, right? We're here in the Forbidden City, bicycle racers are coming by, we're telling a story, and that's very simple. But sometimes then we have to get down into the details, the nitty-gritty of it, right? And like a lot of things, we start wide with our vision, and then we narrow, and then we narrow, and then we narrow, and then we narrow. And we have a synchronized swimmer during a practice round taking a flower out of the Olympic pool after the 100-meter final because people had thrown flowers. So detail photos can really help not only tell your story, but humanize an event. When I was a photojournalist, all I ever wanted to do was see what was on the other side of the door and see what was on the other side of the wall, right? That curiosity, that storytelling. All you ever want to do, what's it look like in the locker room? What's it look like behind the scenes? And I'm so lucky because my job lets me do that. And my former coworkers who still work at newspapers and wire services hate me because we'll be shooting on the field and then I get to go find these quiet behind the scenes moments that no one gets to see. And I have the great privilege and responsibility to share these images with our fan base. When I'm shooting moments like this, I am not taking a bunch of photos. I'm sizing up a situation. Now I have mirrorless cameras, the Z9 and the Z8. I can put them on silent shutter, right? I don't have to make noise. And what I'll do is I'll size it up And I have enough experience now that I know, like, this is a 24-70 or 14-24, 35 millimeter shot. And I'll get the appropriate lens and the appropriate camera, and I'll figure out the exposure, right? And then it's click, 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 and then I'm gone. Because there are only 17 games in a regular NFL season. That's 17 days for them to make their livelihood. In order for me to be behind the scenes, share these human moments, I can't be a distraction. I can't interrupt. So I work very hard at being the so-called fly on the wall. Preparation is such a big part of sports. Everybody watches film, tape, wanted to capture that, wanted to share that. Anybody heard of teams doing a walkthrough the day before a game? You know, the 49ers had their walkthrough. A walkthrough is a mini practice. And it was raining. We're in Philadelphia, I think, and so we're at UPenn. We're up in their gymnasium holding a walkthrough on a basketball court. So these are the kinds of things that a really rabid fan might not ever experience. And so it's my privilege to get to share that. Players on the bus on the way to the Super Bowl. A player watching film the entire flight from Seattle to New York before a Super Bowl. And why is he sitting back in the galley? Because on that plane 10 years ago, there wasn't underseat power to power a laptop. So he sits back there on a little crate or jump seat watching film. Photographing on the charter, another great privilege. We're on a plane, we're taking off after a game, and we haven't won enough games to get in the playoffs. So we're counting on another team to lose. And we're watching the game on the screens on the charter, and that's the moment where the field goal was made, eliminating one team and putting us into the playoffs. This is a moment that wouldn't be shared with anybody if they didn't give me the opportunity and the responsibility to capture this moment. And if I just look at those faces, just joy, right? I couldn't compose that any better. By the way, I know there's some mature, I won't say we're old, mature photographers here who remember doing Hail Marys, and you're trying to, like, is it gonna focus, right? We kind of zone focused with the manual focus, and then when we got autofocus, we're like, okay, we'll try the rectangle, right? Now we've got eye autofocus, so I can hold it up, and remember, I'm only 6'2", so when I hold it up, right, I gotta be able to see down. With eye autofocus, now I get eyes. Before eye autofocus, what would I probably have gotten in focus? The phone, right? Or the lockers, yeah. Knowing me, right? I would have shot the, and when we shoot, we call that Hail Mary, because sometimes when we're doing that, we get a picture of that Nikon square up there, we get a picture of my shoe. You know, anything can happen. The quiet moments, again, silent shutter, one frame, camera on the ground, flip screen up. Quiet moments and crazy moments. This is our head coach at the time, Pete Carroll. Visitors' locker rooms are so different than home locker rooms. Home locker rooms are spacious. They're like your living room. Visitors' locker rooms are like your mud room or your extra garage. Everyone's crammed in. He couldn't talk to everybody, so he stood on the lockers. Which brings me to the next thing that we always want to think about, right? Finding the fun. And for those of you who are photographing youth sports, high school sports, college sports, your kids' sports, your friends' kids' sports, these are all things we can do. We can all go behind the scenes. We can all take, some of the best pictures I took of my son's t-ball are a bunch of 6-year-olds goofing around in the dugout. right? Because how many pictures do I need of them swinging and missing a ball on a tee, right? Or throwing it over the fence, or soccer. 14 kids, right, in a little anthill chasing the ball around. And you're smiling because you've all been there, and we all have those photos. So if we go behind the scenes and we look for these human moments, those are the photos we're going to remember. So we find the fun. We find players dancing during a timeout. We find your place kicker, I don't know why, dressed like a banana on the charter on the way to a game. Basketball was a big thing with the Seahawks. Head coach playing basketball, more basketball. What I'm doing now, and you can do this in your own work with your own teams, all the things around the game, right? Because the game only lasts 60 minutes or 40 minutes or however long it does. There's photos still to be had. If we're going to show the human side and the fun side, we want to be able to capture all those little extra moments, like a snowball fight. A coach in his 70s starting a snowball fight with his players. A player from Florida who'd never seen snow throwing snowballs back at his coach. And you're kind of always, when we're shooting a game, aren't we ready for anything? That's why we have multiple cameras, right? If we're blessed enough to have 2 camera bodies, we've got the long telephoto, right? We've got something a little shorter, a little wider, right? Because we're ready for anything. Because you don't know when Darth Vader is just going to appear in your photo. And you don't know when this is going to happen. And I don't even know what that is. But it's fun. We win the NFC Championship game. Our defensive linemen want to pose for a photo. Rod, we need a group photo. I'm like, all right, let's do a group photo. So they're all like, okay. So they all get ready, and then one of them goes, wait. And they all start taking off their shirts. Okay, now I don't know if you've seen a lot of football. Linemen are not the most svelte-built guys in the world. Okay? So this is what we get, the faces, the joy. They blow this up, I swear, almost this big and put it in their position room. Like, this was our moment. We made the Super Bowl. This is so cool. And our video guys were like, they were delivering iPads, and they were like, did you take that photo of those guys with their shirts off and bellies hanging out? And I go, yeah, I love it. And they're like, okay, well, we want to do the same shot. So these guys take this photo, blow it up just as big, and replace it in the defensive line room. So we're always looking to find the fun. We are always looking to find the fun. Here's the thing. Sports always comes down to winning and losing, right? And I've showed you how we're going to capture behind the scenes, how we're going to always be aware, how we're always going to look away from the field of play because we don't know where the photos can be. But it all comes down to winning. None of these are action pictures, but they all tell you who won. And then there's the best photos can show us who won and who lost, right? This is at the Olympics. US team, Chinese team. The Olympic Committee had just put in a new rule. You had to be 16 years old to compete in the Olympics. The Chinese team wins in an upset over the United States. Kind of an upset. This is the medal ceremony. My newspaper says we need a picture of the medal ceremony because the US, we thought, won, and there's this controversy whether the Chinese girls are too young. A medal ceremony at the gymnastics is a long row of people, 6, 6, 6, right? That's not a great picture for the front page of a newspaper. How can I compress that? How can I tell this story? So what I did was, I think the best angle is going to be from the side. Because then with a long lens, I can compress, right? I can compress 10 girls or 12 women, right, into this photo, and I can be rectangular. That's not an approved photo spot. So I talked to the NBC camera person, had a jib cam, very nice, right? I brought candy, I brought Olympic pins, like I had the $1,000 that Joe talked about, paying the guy to light Ellis Island and bring his generators. And I'm not sure if this is gonna work, but we have to take risks, right? We have to take risks. And so I take this risk, and they're hanging the medals, and it's not a picture, and they're hanging the medals, and I'm like, I might have really done myself wrong here. And then they raise their hands, the US women look, and we capture this moment. Tells a story, doesn't it, right? We see the ages of faces, we see an entire lifetime, even though it's only 17 years, but your parents driving you to practice every morning, right? The injuries that gymnasts have, the wrist injuries, the back injuries, the trying to do school on a bus, waiting for your turn. We see all of that in this photo, and I was very fortunate. This photo was rewarded first place Pictures of the Year in Olympic feature. But it came about because, not because I pressed the shutter, right? But because I was thinking about, how do I tell the human side of this story? I'd already shot the competition. I'd shot the floor exercise, the balance beam, right? All of those things. Now it came down to one moment, use the most important piece of equipment. Nothing against, I love all my Nikon equipment. I'm a Nikon ambassador, very fortunate enough to be one. The cameras are made of glass and in other incredible materials, but they're tools, aren't they? They're tools. They're in our hands, in your hands, Brandon, and your hands, right? In our hands, now we can create magic, right? But the camera doesn't work unless our brain tells the camera what we want to do. So one of the things I want you to take away from here is, I want you to be able to go, I want to think about and now create my image. Winning and losing. The last thing I want to talk about is something that a guy named Frosty Westring, who's a football coach, used to talk about. Division III, winningest coach. They said, why don't you want to coach Division I? Why don't you want to coach in the pros? He said, I like coaching this level. And I remind my players, we can win national championships. We can be great where we are. I get to shoot the NFL. You might be shooting college or high school or youth. Treat every game like it's the Super Bowl or the World Series, because you might have Felix Hernandez, right, pitching in a Major League Baseball game. But if you're shooting the Special Olympics, which is my personal favorite thing to shoot, you can make the same photo. You can make the same photo in Beijing as you can at your local YMCA. You can make the same photo at an NFL stadium with 70,000 screaming fans as you can at a flag football game. So just because I've gotten to the point in my career where I'm so lucky I get to do this in the big stadiums, my favorite thing is to do it in the smaller venues. So NFL, Special Olympics, Tyler Lockett, he scores the first down, he's on the ground, nice photo. It's the same thing no matter where we are. Find the humanity, it's there. Let's not get so locked into the action that we forget the reaction, and to show the emotion, right, and the fun and the humanity of sports. Because we're privileged. We get to document athletes. We get to document teams. We get to document sports, to document brotherhood and sisterhood and family. It doesn't matter if you are in the NFL or you're at the local level. It's accessible to all of us. And with that, I want to say thank you very, very much for your time.